I'm glad we remembered to record. And then as you see it stream on Facebook, let me know and I can get started.
All right, and we are going live in a few seconds. All
When
right.
you see speaker view, are you seeing is it showing up? Can they see me and Avery? I'm not sure.
Yes, they can.
They can. Okay, perfect. Awesome.
All right, perfect. We are live and ready to start whenever you are.
Okay. Okay, awesome. Thank you everyone for joining us again. I know that last time we had some issues with streaming into Facebook, and we later realized that end of April, Facebook changed its settings and we weren't able to stream from Zoom into Facebook. And so we've found a workaround. So thank you for putting up with us as we streamline things. And we're going to get started in a few minutes. Adrian, I'm not sure. Can they see me speak? Am I, because on my end I'm just seeing a screenshot.
Yes, they can see you speak. It's currently set to speaker view, so whoever's speaking
Okay,
will get the
perfect.
screen.
Awesome. Okay, guys. As always, for those of you listening to this on replay, drop hashtag replay into the comments so that, this helps with the algorithm and it pushes this video up to the top so more people can hear it and benefit from it. Those of you with questions, feel free to keep dropping. Those of you within the coaching program who are with us on Zoom, guys, drop your questions into the chat box. Avery has graciously agreed to stay on a little longer to try to get to all the questions. And those of you on Facebook and YouTube, keep putting your questions into the comments and chat, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. If not, we'll get to answering those questions later. And yeah, we'll make sure we have enough time for Q&A. I have some questions though, but I am super excited about this episode, and I'm going to get started. Okay, as far as streaming, we're good, Adrian, right? I'm good to start recording?
Yeah, we're all good.
Okay, perfect. Guys, today we're going to be talking about starting and scaling a short-term rental portfolio. And so many of you probably heard, even during the summit, we had some of our, members of the coaching program, physicians who work full-time, who came and spoke about how they sheltered in 1 year over $500,000 of clinical income from taxes, and they're generating six figures in income from a single property. And you're thinking about short-term rentals, but you're still stuck at, how do I pick the right market? Am I going to pick a profitable property, or am I going to make a big mistake? And how can you even remotely manage a property when you have a full-time job? Some of you probably have a property and you're thinking about scaling, from 1 to 10 in terms of short-term rentals, but it seems overwhelming. Today we have Avery Carl. She is author of Amazon's bestseller, Short-Term Rental, Long-Term Wealth. She's also CEO of the Short-Term Shop, the country's top short-term rental agency. And Avery and her husband, Luke, they scaled their real estate portfolio in a span of 5 years from 0 to 220 doors, which is super impressive, through strategic investing. And we're going to be talking about current short-term rental market trends, acquisition of short-term rentals, marketing, remote management, scaling, everything that you probably have tons of questions about. I'm super excited to have you here with us, Avery. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Avery, usually when we start out, I like it when, if you could just go ahead and start sharing your journey with us, because 2016, I believe that's when you started, and your first property was a $100,000 property. And I just want to hear in your own words what that journey looked like for you, right? As you're starting out, what was your mindset like? What were you thinking? What barriers did you have to overcome? And how did you get to where you are today?
Well, it was kind of an accident. I did not grow up saying I want to be a real estate investor or real estate agent when I grow up. We kind of backed into it. We had just moved from New York City to Nashville, and our real estate agent at the time was really trying to get us to buy in East Nashville, which is like the hipster area of Nashville that was appreciating really, really quickly. And we said, no, thanks. Like, we're moving from Brooklyn to Tennessee. We want to be out in the country. We were done with neighbors. So we bought something out in the country, but it kind of stuck in our mind about the appreciation. And we actually, so we had saved up, we were like just starting out. I was still in grad school. or just finishing, and had a very, very like small time job. Well, I mean, I was working as a music manager in the music business, and the music business just does not pay well because it's so sexy, and like anybody would do it for free basically. So I was making $37,000 a year, and we'd saved up, I think we'd just gotten married, saved up like $10,000-$15,000, some small amount. And there was an Edward Jones in my same building. And we went to a financial advisor there and said, hey, we have this money saved up. Like, what should we do with it? And they basically told us we didn't have enough money for them to work with us. And we were like, okay, we're losers. Like, what are we going to do with this? And so we kind of thought back about buying a house. And I said, well, I was a big Dave Ramsey person at the time, not anymore, but at the time I was. And so I thought, well, man, what if we buy one of those houses and we rent it out so we're not having to pay for it? And then in 20 years, we didn't have kids at the time. We've got 2 now, but I was always thinking about that. And, when our future kids need to go to college, we can sell this house and pay for their college out of the appreciation. And we will be these geniuses, these financial geniuses by having done this. And so an average long-term rental in that market was about $100,000 back then. So we saved up, and I started listening to things, listening to podcasts and things, and we've got one. And the mortgage on it was $645 a month, and we were able to rent it out for $1,500 a month, which coincidentally, after all of the deductions and everything on my paycheck, was about what I was making a month. And we're like, oh, cool. This house is making the same amount a month as I do. So, then we said, well, wait a minute, we need more of these. We want to actually build a business out of this. So it was then that we started listening to like all the Bigger Pockets episodes. This was back in 2012. There weren't, at least not that I was aware of, courses, masterminds on this. And we had a little bit of just like one single family property worth of a down payment left. And we said, well, what can we buy that's going to make us the most amount of money the fastest so we can buy more of these things faster? And we landed on short-term rentals, but we knew we didn't want to do it in Nashville because Nashville was very still is. And we couldn't afford to buy something and then be told in 2 years, you can't do this with it. So we'd just been on vacation to the Smoky Mountains, about 3.5 hours east of Nashville. And we'd stayed in a cabin. Our friends stayed in cabins. Everybody was staying in cabins. So we figured somebody owns these cabins and they're renting them out. Why can't it be us? And again, back then there was no AirDNA. I think AirDNA started the same year that we bought our first property. This was 2015 at this time. No courses, no nothing. So we kind of had to figure out how to self-manage remotely on our own, because at the time, the average property management split for short-term rentals was 40% of your gross. And we were like, whoa, wait a minute. We need that 40%. So we just kind of figured out how to do it. And there property management software didn't exist back then. It was just the Airbnb app and the Vrbo app. And they did have a calendar sync already, but that was it.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we just kind of figured it out and grew from there.
That's awesome. It's interesting that you said it was an accident starting out. And honestly, same thing for me. When I started out, I didn't really think that this was the vehicle I was going to use to get to financial freedom. But like you said, you look at that first property actually sets you free because you look at the numbers and then suddenly something clicks in your head. And I think it's impressive that you guys shifted to STRs pretty quickly. And something else about what you said, where you were told that you don't have enough money to go down the traditional investment route. And there are a lot of people who think about real estate investing and they think, well, I have enough money for investing in stocks. It's a smaller amount that I require, but I don't have enough money to get started in real estate investing. So a lot of key points that you made over there. Can you go a little deeper, Avery, into maybe like misconceptions? And I know you mentioned the Dave Ramsey mindset where we're against leverage and debt and all of that. A lot of people, I think, still have those barriers, but the mindset shift that you had to make to get to where you are, to the scale that you're at this point.
So mindset shifts that we had to make. So at the beginning, money coming in. So we started with that first property in the Smokies. We scaled that to 5 in, the course of about 1.5 years. But I would really want to hold on to it. I want to hoard it because I am still deep down. I still am very like conservative Dave Ramsey style brain. But kind of learning to deploy money in order to make money, and that you don't have to just like hang on to all of it or else it's going to disappear. Obviously you have to make good decisions, but understanding that you do have to make your money work for you was, I think, the biggest hurdle to get over, because you grow up being taught, or at least I was, maybe not everybody is, but you save your money, you save and save and save. And then when you're 55, you can go crazy with your knee pain and your what have you, but which I already have at 35, by the way.
Me too.
But
I'm hitting 45 this year. My knees are hurting.
yeah.
So totally understand. Yeah. And that's the biggest, the just shift of that mindset is super important. And like for you, for me, seeing what my portfolio did over the first few years, that helped me more than listening to anyone could have. And so taking action, is always the best thing. I know you used short-term rentals to scale pretty rapidly, but I believe you're at 220 doors and the bulk of those are long-term rentals. So can you, and even within our coaching program, we have multiple verticals. We teach people to invest in short-term rentals, mid-term rentals. The foundation is all long-term rentals, and then multifamily. And I know you guys do a lot of multifamily also. So explain to us how short-term rentals helped you scale and why you made the decision to diversify it out, where you're not just focused and concentrated in STRs, although you guys do that amazingly well.
Yeah. So our very first property was a long-term. And when we went the short-term route, it wasn't because we were like, oh man, we're going to make so much more money on short terms and we're going to only do this. It was so we could make more money to buy more long-term. So our goal from the get-go was kind of to use this as a bit of a springboard cash flow wise in order to be able to buy more. Now, I will say, there's not a lot of people out there who do both. Like I know a lot of long-term investors who don't want to mess with short-term, period. I know a short-term rental investor who's been buying short-term rentals since before me, I think since like 2012. And he's one of my husband's really good friends. And he only has 1-bedroom short-term rentals. So some condos in Siesta Key and 1-bedroom cabins in the Smokies. He could buy all the huge ones in the world that he wanted, but he only does that. He could go buy long-term apartment buildings, but nope, I only want 1-bedroom short-term rentals. So you don't see a lot of people diversify around, but I really think that you should. And what kind of solidified it for me, so we did the 1 long-term in Nashville, then we got up to 5 short-terms in the Smokies, and one of our short-term doors is probably 5 times the amount of one of our long-term doors on average. So like we've got 200-ish long-terms and 8 short-terms, but our average short-term door is like 800,000. I mean, it's actually even more than I said. And then our average long-term door is like 80,000. But once we got to those 5 short terms, we were like, you know what? I think we can start, maybe let's throw a few long terms in again, just to get things, diversified, have a little bit of everything. Cause you never know. Cause back then the self-managing short-term rental thing was very new. Vacation rentals were not new. That's been an asset class for a really long time, but the self-managing thing I would say is about 10 years old. Yeah. And, so we bought a few long terms in Chattanooga. And then by the time COVID rolled around, we had 6 short terms and like 40 long terms. And when that happened and everything shut down and they shut down all the short terms, we were like, well, crap, the other shoe finally dropped. It finally happened. We knew it was going to happen. Good thing we have all these long terms. And what actually happened was the opposite. Everybody froze for 2 weeks, laid around and watched Tiger King and gained 15 pounds. And our short terms boomed, like they flooded back. And it was our long terms that we had to worry about with the eviction moratoriums. But after just that 1-2 week experience of thinking, oh crap, there go the short terms, never mind, wait, it's the long terms. But either way, we had the other thing to support us. It was a really good feeling of like, well, that sucks, but we're going to have this other thing to support it through until we get through this. So that's a really good, peaceful feeling and a very not peaceful time that I will never forget, that I always want to keep. So I'm just a big fan of all of it. The long terms are significantly less day-to-day work, but they are, I would say, a comparable amount of work when you have to do it. So short terms, you're managing a few things a week. Long terms, once you get somebody in there, you're not really having to do anything for a minimum of a year. But when they move out, you are probably going to have to redo the whole thing, carpet, paint, etc. So it's just a different kind of work. And we just like to have, a little bit of everything. We don't have any midterms, not to say that I wouldn't, but it just hasn't, I don't feel like starting a new asset class anymore.
You know what
Maybe
you
I'll, yeah.
I have 3 of my long-term rentals that are vacant right now. And to your point, I completely understand there come those periods where you do have to put a little bit of effort into those. But again, like you mentioned, Nashville, that was a market I was considering in 2014 also. And the funny thing is that rents haven't risen as much as home prices have, and with interest rates the way they are right now, it's kind of hard to find something that's cash flowing in that market. But short-term rentals, again, even with the way they are, you can find a profitable property. And a lot of our coaches within the coaching program do just short-term rentals, right? And some of them just prefer to have that, to stick to that niche. And like you, I believe that a resilient portfolio is a little bit of everything. So I'm super excited to deep dive into the short-term rental part of it. But I want to ask you a question before we get started with specifics. Do you believe that short-term rentals can work for everyone? Do you think it's an asset that everyone can get into and do well?
I think there are certain personality types that are going to have a harder time with it than other personality types. It can work for everyone. You just might have to make some adjustments. Not to pick on engineers, but engineers typically will have a more difficult time with short-term rentals because it's very interpersonal and not data driven. Like it's not just, I have to complete these 4 tasks and this is the right and only way to do this. It's, you're having to adjust the way you communicate based on who's in the house and how they communicate and what it is that they're looking for. And, being hospitable, like somebody who has waited tables for 5 years and has no corporate experience might have an easier time of running short-term rentals than a high-level engineer. So it can work for everyone, but there might just have to be some adjustments and understandings with, it's not always going to work the same way that your day job has worked.
I see that you chose engineers. I feel like you deliberately stayed away from saying physicians, but I think physicians.
No, you guys, I think it's very similar to dealing with patients. Like my dad's not an MD, he's a chiropractor, but you're doing the same work a lot of times, at varying degrees of your capabilities, but your patients still have to like you, like if I go into a doctor and I hate them, then I'm probably not, I'm going to find another doctor of that specialty. So it's very similar because you're still dealing with people, a lot of you, except for maybe radiologists.
It is an art and a science, right? Medicine is not just a science, there's an art to it. So we are kind of used to it. You're absolutely right. And like you said, it's sometimes dealing with the seasonality of things and having those curveballs and dealing with them. It doesn't suit all personality types, but like you said, if you can have a property manager in there or a co-host and someone who can take away the things that you're not good at, and you can still potentially make it work, but as long as you go in with your eyes open. So let's get into more of the specifics, Avery. Let's talk about market selection. Can you tell us what markets you're in, how you choose markets? I think what we're seeing right now is that in the current climate, in some of the more mature STR markets, there's oversaturation. People are talking about emerging markets. When you think about acquisitions, what's your take on, how people should look at picking a market?
Andre says engineer here. Sorry to pick on you. So here's the way I feel about it is a little bit different than what you might see floating past your Instagram. So for me, I like regional drivable vacation markets. Yes, there's a lot of rentals in the Smokies. Yes, there's a lot of rentals down here in the Panhandle of Florida where I live. I have owned in the Smokies, I've owned 5 since before COVID. None of them are ultra luxury or crazy, insert crazy theme here. They're all just cute, clean, and comfortable. And they have consistently, I've got a 2-bedroom. Before COVID, it was doing both of my 2 bedrooms were doing $45,000 a year. They've done $80,000 every year since 2021. And they're not these crazy new builds that, has everything in the world you can think of. They're just cute cabins. We've redone some kitchens and floors and things here and there. There's always, for me, the way that people talk about short terms, I kind of think it's time for us as short-term rental investors to kind of grow up a little bit. Like, our older siblings, the multifamily investors, you don't ever hear them say, oh, there's way too many apartment buildings. I'm not investing in apartments anymore. What they do is they find the opportunity. So maybe a property that needs a lot of work or has a lot of bad tenants that they need to get those moved out so they can update and increase the income. They find those opportunities in the good markets. So like Nashville, Austin, yes, super expensive. But if you can get the right deal in those markets and fix it up and get it to where it needs to be, then you've got, you're golden. And I think it's the same thing with short term. So everybody's like, oh no, not the Smokies. I will buy in the Smokies all day, every day. I don't care if I have to fix it up. I'll buy the ugliest property in the best location in the Smokies and run it that way. I think that people get a little too caught up in, oh, I got to go buy where nobody is. I got to go buy in this market that nobody's ever heard of. And that's okay. You can be successful doing that, but there's going to be different challenges than there are in the markets that have a lot of rentals. So you might have to train somebody who's used to cleaning primary homes on how to turn a vacation rental. Those are two different kinds of jobs. I personally like to stick to regional drivable vacation markets because I know that tourism is never going anywhere. The tourism of the Great Smoky Mountains, never going anywhere. Tourism down here at the Emerald Coast is never going anywhere. People from Atlanta, Houston, New Orleans, all of the big southeastern cities are always going to come here for vacation. I like to see that more than I like to see like, oh, I'm the first one to discover this place. Great for me. So I like the big blue chip markets for that. Now, I do own some in what I would call emerging markets that are still true vacation markets. So the Forgotten Coast of Florida, for example, Emerald Coast right here is Destin, Panama City, 30A. For those of you who aren't familiar, Navarre, all that stuff. Right over on the other side of Panama City, to the east of Panama City, is the Forgotten Coast. It is a very mature vacation market, all vacation rentals. You could not live there full time if you wanted to. There's like nothing. There's one grocery store. But the majority of those properties are on the same 3 property management companies that have been around since the 80s. They're doing everything the same way they have since the 80s. So there's not a lot of great data in terms of performance when you're looking at the Forgotten Coast versus like a Destin, where there's lots and lots of sophisticated operators. But I do also own in Destin, and taking the concepts that we know from managing in blue chip markets like that and applying to an emerging market like the Forgotten Coast, we've done extremely well. So, but there's pros and cons to that. There's not the good data if you're a data person in a market like the Forgotten Coast to really give you an idea of what you can do if you do really well, because there's not a lot of great operators there yet. Destin, tons of great data. It's going to be harder to find a deal because it is a blue chip market. So, there's pros and cons to both. But for me, I like regional drivable vacation markets. So that's, beaches, mountains, national parks.
I love that. And I have the same perspective as you do. And we do hear a lot about emerging markets, but I feel like, and even in multifamily, right? Long-term trends is what we look at. Phoenix and Dallas may be super hot, may be saturated, but we will still invest there because, in the long term, there is that migration. And like you said, with short-term rentals, you're looking at foot traffic, and those mature markets are going to have them. So I completely agree with that perspective, and thank you for sharing. Now, for people starting out, and when they were exploring, say, metro markets, or the metro markets already have regulations established, but they're looking at emerging markets or metro markets. How should they approach looking at regulations, and what should they keep in the back of their mind as they're exploring that? And what's the best way for them to go about and make sure they're doing their due diligence?
Always call the county or the city, depending on whether you're buying inside or outside city limits, and ask directly. Because you never know, there might not be regulations now. If you just go on their website and it says, oh, no regulations, or the regulations are this, but there's something that's being talked about at city council meetings and stuff, but it's not there yet. You need to call and make sure that that's not happening and know those things. I see a lot of people who will come to our agents. So we've got agents in 20 markets. There's 50 of us, and say like, oh, hey, can you call in? Don't ever have anybody else do that work for you. Always do it yourself, because stuff can get lost in translation, misunderstandings happen. So always call county or the city or both, depending, on where the property is, and just make sure you understand that really before you go get too excited looking around on Zillow and stuff too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then same thing with HOA. I feel like sometimes just relying on your agent doesn't work if the property, I mean, and obviously if you can get a property that's not on an HOA, that makes sense. But I've had issues where sometimes people buy properties in an HOA just based on what some they overheard as opposed to looking at the CCNRs, and always doing that due diligence yourself is
Yeah.
what you should be doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and make sure that you call when it comes to HOAs. So I'm currently shopping in the Texas Hill Country for a place, and I've got my agent who works for me at the short-term shop looking for me too. And she sent me the CCNRs of an HOA of a place that looked great. All the lots are huge, like you can't see anybody else. It's like being out in the woods. And the CCNRs had the exact same wording as all the other CCNRs. So legally, like somebody probably could go after this, but I just noticed that there were no other rentals in the community. So I said, well, let me just call. And so I called and they were like, no, we don't allow that. Now, on paper, legally, could I go after that with an attorney? And yes, because the wording wasn't in there, but
Yeah.
that's not something I'm going to mess with.
Yeah.
I'm not going to try and trailblaze somewhere where we're not wanted. I'll go find somewhere where it's more friendly. So
Yes.
always call too, if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in terms of running numbers and analyzing profitability, Avery, what are your tips for someone who's starting out? There are a lot of calculators. We have our own calculator, guys, in the resources section on the homepage. But what do you think people should look at as they're trying to analyze the profitability of a specific property?
Oh, so many things. We'll talk about quantitative and qualitative data. We'll start with quantitative first. So you want to get as much data as you can from as many places as you can, because no one data source is going to be gospel. Like AirDNA will never be gospel. Rabu is never going to be exactly what you're going to make. Now, especially where we're seeing a lot of influencers pop up that are, you can pay a few $1,000s to tell you what to do. That is still not gospel. That is still one data point that you want to put in your spreadsheet with all the other data points and come up with a range of what you think, let's say, like a 5-bedroom in Panama City Beach should be able to do. Then you have to look at the qualitative side of things. You've got your quantitative spreadsheet and you make a spreadsheet of your qualitative data as well, which sounds, ridiculous because it's a spreadsheet of qualitative. But so what we do to figure out the qualitative side of things is what we at the short-term shop call the enemy method, where you basically, you go on Airbnb and Vrbo, zoom in on the little area you plan to buy and check out your enemies or your neighbors. Enemy is just more fun to say. So we call it the enemy method. And what you're looking for is the stuff that the data can't tell you. Like the data can tell you the what, it can't tell you the why. So look at your property versus the other properties around you that a guest might be, comparing you to book, and look at things like design, decor. So down here, if we'll use Panama City, for example, like a new beach house that's all shiplap and white is probably going to do better than like a 2005, like Tuscan style dated, it's still a nice house, but it's 2005-ish. The data is not going to be able to tell you that. It's not going to be able to tell you what looks more attractive to guests in pictures. You have to look at that and see. You're looking for things like views of the water. Data is not going to be able to tell you that. Amenities, decor, all of these things that would basically at its simplest just make a guest choose you over them. What do these people have that you can imitate or improve upon in order to make people choose you instead of them? And you'll be able to see once you start looking at comps, like, okay, you're looking at 10 5-bedrooms in the area. You'll very clearly be able to tell which ones are at the bottom of the range you've come up with and which will be at the top, and try to emulate the ones at the top and, do better than the ones at the bottom.
Yeah. You mentioned location previously, how location is super important for STRs. Tell us about amenities. When you're looking in beach markets or mountain markets, what amenities do you like to focus on and make sure that it is already there in the property?
So pools are a big one. Like in the Smoky Mountains, indoor pools are a big thing. You kind of have to decide if you want to do that or not. None of my mountain properties have pools. Two of my beach properties have pools. One does not have a pool. My advice is you always want to have a pool if you can get it. If it's available to do it. There are some hacks like down here at the beach. I mean, a property without a pool is going to be like $300,000 less than a comparable one with a pool. It's about $70,000 to put in a pool. So if you have the time, if it's got the room, I would rather buy something that doesn't have one and put it in.
Yeah.
But you know, you want to have a pool. Hot tubs in mountain markets, gotta have them. Beach markets, you know, it doesn't make sense. It's already hot. What do you need a hot tub for? Again, you want to look at the enemy method and look at what makes sense amenity wise. Like, you're probably not going to put a sauna at the beach, sauna at the mountains. Okay. Sauna in the desert. Sure. And just see what everybody else has, and where you'll really be able to kind of set yourself apart is the blank spaces of the house. So what I mean by blank spaces is like backyard space or like extra, I call it a playroom because I've got kids, you know, extra room space, you know, extra living area space. Like a 4-bedroom is going to have 4 bedrooms. You know that. But if you can come up with something cool to do in the blank spaces, like pickleball courts, not really that expensive to put in. Again, know your audience. Like, people are probably not going to the Smoky Mountains to play pickleball, but Scottsdale, Austin, they will be. So again, understanding, the most important thing you can do is really understand the type of guest that's coming to your market and what it is they want to do.
Love it.
To then determine what amenities.
Yeah. And now this is another question we get a lot with people who are starting out, right? They're looking at 2-bedroom properties in the Smokies, and they're also looking on the other end at luxury properties that are over $1 million, and they could do both, but they are concerned about the, you know, the higher mortgage payments. And, you know, as they're starting out, how do you help people navigate that decision, right? Do I do like a 2 or a 4-bedroom? And how do I do that in different markets? How do I know what makes the most sense?
So that's going to depend a lot on you and what you want to do. But for now, you know, the way the mortgage rates are, if you're buying in a vacation market, this doesn't work in metro markets, but in vacation markets, if you're worried about, you know, saturation and mortgage payments and all those things, you're never going to regret buying under your budget. And 1-bedrooms and studio properties that are not in metro markets, because in metro markets, those would be competing with hotels, and you don't want to do that. But in vacation markets, they are almost always less than 1% of the available inventory. And you can buy, you know, if you do want to spend your whole budget, you can buy several of those. And as somebody who I own studios up through 5 bedrooms. And, you know, my 4 and 5 bedrooms do make more money. They do have a higher return on investment than percentage-wise than the smaller ones, but the smaller ones are always booked. So they can kind of, if you've got some little ones in your portfolio like that, they can sometimes carry your portfolio through some recessionary times. Like, I just did a bunch of podcasts in the Smokies where we interviewed 3 or 4 different clients who own different sizes. And I did some Instagram interview reels that aren't out yet. And every single person was like, yeah, my favorite size right now is my 1-bedrooms. My 1-bedrooms are making 70 grand. And because they just stay booked. So if, you know, when in doubt in a vacation market, 0 beds, 1 beds, they're very often overlooked by investors. But then, you know, like my friend Pavan, 31 bedrooms, that's all he'll buy. And it's because they do stay rented. Now, having 5 1-bedrooms versus 1 5-bedroom, you've got 5 sets of guests to deal with at one time versus, you know, 5 roofs, 5 HVACs to break. So there's that component of it where it's easier to manage one larger one. But I think for where we are in the economy right now with interest rates, that interest rate is a lot less at 8% on a 1-bedroom than it is on a 10-bedroom right now.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, Avery. I think I'm hearing it for the first time because I've always heard the luxury ones, you know, your ROI is higher, but that makes a lot of sense.
And that's true too.
Yeah. But this makes sense too. And I think, you know, it's an important perspective for people to hear. So let's go more into tactical stuff. Now, you know, you self-manage your short-term rentals, and a lot of our members also manage short-term rentals from across the country. And these are physicians who are working full-time and they have little kids. And how does someone think about that? I mean, so I think that's a big limiting barrier for people who are just starting out. You know, they feel like I need to buy something close by. And so why do you self-manage without a property manager, and how should people think about this?
So we started out self-managing because we just needed to squeeze every dollar out. We couldn't afford to pay somebody 40% because we had our empire to go build.
Yeah.
But now we have stuck with it because you can do the same work once you have done it long enough, which I would say you need to do it at least a year before you do this, where you can do it with a VA for $30,000 a year. Instead of, if I give you guys, we have a VA who works for us. Only part of his job is running our short terms. He's got another, I would say 30% of his time is spent managing our short terms, and everything else is other parts of the businesses. You can, if I'd paid somebody to manage our 8 properties at 25% last year, that'd be $250,000 for a job that really is, $50,000 tops worth of work. So I would say, once you get to the point of having done it a year, okay, you kind of understand the seasonality, you've run into like all the guest archetypes and got, what the FAQs are going to be, handing that off to a VA is just much more cost effective than handing it off to a full-on manager.
Yeah, makes absolute sense. And, even within our community, like for people who are working full-time, you get the tax benefits when you self-manage. So that's another incentive why people do it, at least in year one. And then, like Avery said, you could hand it off to a co-host or a VA, someone who may be more cost efficient. In terms of getting boots on the ground, because those are the people who are helping you self-manage, right, Avery? What is your, tips for people who are trying to navigate finding a good cleaner or a handyman, and they're out of state essentially?
Well, if you buy with a short-term shop in any of our markets, we have all of those people set up. We've got a list of vetted recommendations for you. If not, there's always Facebook groups, but you kind of have to be careful when you're taking recommendations from Facebook groups, because there will be a lot of, oh, I'm looking for a cleaner, and then somebody will get a bunch of recommendations, but it might be like their friend or their sister or whoever. So make sure when you're taking recommendations from the internet like that, you ask that person like, oh, hey, did they clean for you? And just make sure, whether it's a real estate agent or a cleaner or a handyman, make sure the person that you are taking that recommendation from has actually used them for that task. And it's not just like, oh, I'm recommending my sister because I love her.
Yeah. Such valuable points, Avery. I feel like I have so many more questions, but in the interest of time, I'm going to try to wrap it up over here. And so, in the current economy, right, it's not just sufficient to buy the right property. You need to kind of make sure you're marketing it right, listing it right. Listing optimization is a big thing, guest experience, and that's how you maintain revenue. What are your tips for people who have acquired an SDR? How do they make the property stand out? How do they make sure that they are occupying it and, they're optimizing revenue essentially?
Okay, I can never say this enough, and I say this all the time, but people still come to me and say, hey, what's wrong with my listing? And I have to point this out. Pro photos, good, light, bright pro photos. And it's okay to have some of those artsy pictures of them zoomed in of like a pretty tray with coffee mugs on it, but make sure you're not leading with those. Like, you want to lead with the photos that actually give people a good idea of what the space is. Your headline is another one where people make big mistakes, because, we all like to name our properties cutesy things, but that headline space is your X amount of characters worth of like just quick space to tell the guests what they want to know about a property. And if half of your character limit is taken up by the name like Paradise City or something, that's real estate you could have used to be descriptive about the property. Like for me, I want all king beds. My husband is 6'5", I'm 5'8". We cannot fit in a bed, in a queen bed. And our kids want to sleep with us all the time because they're little and they get scared and, whatever, the whole thing. Things like that. Or, maybe you want, the most important thing you want people to know is you can walk to X, Y, and Z. You want all that to be in your headline, and don't waste space with like the cute name. Like, yeah, it's cute, it's fun. Put that somewhere else though, because you need to use that as descriptive stuff to kind of draw people in. I would say also analysis paralysis is real. Don't get too caught up in trying to go where nobody's discovered yet. Guys, it's discovered. Like if people have been going there for long enough for you to be able to make money, there are already people investing there. Just because the gurus haven't started mentioning it everywhere doesn't mean that it's already done. I mean, that it's not already done. So just like understand there are no secrets. If you're confused about where to start in terms of choosing a market, choose a market that you know. Like, for example, I grew up in Starkville, Mississippi. The only thing there is Mississippi State University. People who are just looking at data and trying to find somewhere like, SEC football schools, that's a great place to invest. That can be true, but choose somewhere that you're familiar with. Is Starkville, Mississippi ever going to be on any lists of like best places to invest? Probably not. But I know I can be successful there because I know everything about it. I know who comes there. I know when. I have plenty of connections for cleaners and people to help me with things. And I can be successful there. So just because it's like not on the lists and not on the things, if you're familiar with it, that makes it a good enough place to start that you might be able to be successful. So I think that's a big one, is a lot of people are like, oh, where should I invest? Let me look at all these crazy lists. Just start with somewhere you like to go and that you know, and then build out from there on what the regulations are and income data and all that.
I love that. Such valuable information, Avery. I want to like summarize everything. So RDNA came out with their data for Q1 and Q2 and Q2 forecasts. And, there's promising information. We're seeing people thrive in the STR space. But again, people have concerns about, in this interest rate environment, with prices being where they are, with where the economy is, and post-pandemic demand going down and market saturation. I mean, is it still the right time to go into STRs? So we've talked about a lot of those things, but just in summary, what trends are you seeing in terms of revenue and profitability with STRs, and what's your last words of advice for anyone listening?
So when I started investing in 2012 in Nashville, we went to meetups and, did, because that's what you did back then. There weren't masterminds online and all that. And all the investors in Nashville who we listened to talking about how much money they were spending on direct mail and wholesalers and all this crazy complicated stuff. They were telling, all they would talk about is how Nashville is over. You had to buy pre-2010 for long-term in Nashville to make sense. And then me and my husband, just two little dummies, went and bought something right off the MLS that was a smoking deal. We were cash flowing a little less than $1,000 a month on a long-term rental, which is hard to do. And right under all of these other investors' noses. So my advice would be, just don't ever let anybody tell you it can't be done or it's too late. There's always opportunity in any asset class, in any market. So you just have to be patient and persistent to find it, especially now. It is a really weird time in real estate. Less homes were sold in 2023 than all the way back to the Great Recession. So we are in the very bottom of the real estate cycle right now. So it's kind of weird to be able to find houses right now. But I'll tell you, like I tell my clients, if you come back to me in 2 or 3 weeks and say, oh, I tried X market and it doesn't work. It's not that the market doesn't work. It's that you quit. It's not, markets don't not work. Investors don't work. So patience and persistence to be able to find your deals. It's going to take more of that now than it did, 10 years ago. But the deals are out there. Yesterday was always the best time to invest in real estate, as they say, but the second best time is today. So just get out there and be persistent, and you will be able to find something. It's just going to, might take a little creativity.
That's amazing. And it's such an apt time for that piece of advice, patience and persistence, because we have a lot of people in the current cohort of our coaching program where they're running numbers, and I think it's important for them to hear that. Avery, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and perspective. Both you and Luke, you are educators at heart and such an inspiration. For anyone interested in connecting with the short-term shop that Luke and Avery run, again, they are the top premier short-term rental agents in the country. They educate and they help provide you with tons of resources. Anyone looking to connect with them, guys, you can fill out the form at generationalwealthmd.com/agent and specifically request an introduction to the short-term shop. I think they provide tons of value, and they're great in terms of educating and walking you through everything. And so thank you again, Avery, for this. This was amazing.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
We're going to get into the Q&A part now, and we'll get into all the questions we're seeing here on Zoom first, and then we'll hop on to Facebook. Adrian, if you can gather the questions on the other platforms, that would be a little helpful. I'll read them out for you, Avery, so it's easy and everyone can hear. So Priyanka and Satya, their question was, Avery, our biggest challenge for STR has been finding sorry, that just hopped on me, has been finding a cash flowing property with the current interest rate. Also, AirDNA numbers seem to be an overestimation of revenue. I double checked the data with owning and data rabu, the enemy method, but then I'm not sure what data to trust and what to consider. Any suggestions on how to get an accurate picture of the property's potential?
Yeah, that's a big one. I would take an average. I'd also stay away from any of the property specific analyzers where you just type in the address and it spits out a number, because all those are doing is taking the sample size from the whole market and shrinking it down to about 10 properties, which seems like a great idea, except if there's any outliers in any of those, either up or down, it will tell you the absolute wrong thing. For example, down here, about 2 miles from where I am on 30A, there's a little community called Seaside that's very upscale. I mean, minimum $3 million to get into it. The properties that are on the beach there will do, $500,000 a year, and it's going to cost you $20 million to get one. There's another little more budget neighborhood right next door to Seaside called Nature Walk. And the houses are nice, for primary homes, people to live in, they're nice. It's not like the Waltons from Walmart are buying this as a second home. They're just cute, nice places to live. They're big houses, 3,000 square feet, not huge, but, big enough for the beach big. Anyway, those houses are an average of 1.5 million. But I had an investor come to me last year and say, hey, I think I found the best deal ever. It's 1.5 million. It's going to make 300,000. I was like, let me see that. So the AirDNA Rentalizer, because it was right next door to Seaside, a lot of the comps that it was pulling in as just the closest other 4 bedrooms to this 4-bedroom he was looking at were beachfront on in Seaside. So it's a completely different caliber of house that his was never ever it was gonna do maybe 100. So you have to be careful with those with those fill in a property address and spit out a number tools, because they can really, really steer you the wrong way. Same thing if there's one really bad underproducer, it'll tell you I'll throw my addresses in there every now and then. And I've seen it be under by 20,000 on a 2-bedroom property, and I've seen it be over also. So it can steer you wrong both ways. So try to look independently at all of the properties around it using the enemy method. But in terms of data, get as much data as you can from as many data sources as you can and take an average, because they're all going to scrape just a little bit different. I do know I think Awning uses AirDNA's data. Rabu, I think, has their own scraper. But anyway, as much as you can, all data points, nothing is gospel, just more data points.
And then the second part of that question is, can you talk about exit strategies for STRs? We would like to ideally change our STRs to LTRs if possible, if there are issues with the properties. But the lake properties we're looking at, I'm not sure if they would work as LTRs. And what would be STR markets which also work as LTRs? And I know that this is a backup exit strategy we use in the metro market quite often, but I guess specifically, I think they're talking specifically about vacation markets. How well do the STRs perform if you had to switch them into LTRs? How do the STRs perform when you need to switch them?
Yeah, so in vacation markets, I mean, if that's something that you want to be able to do, I would stick to a metro market or a vacation-ish market. The ones that we operate in are Scottsdale would work, or the Sarasota Bradenton area would also work to be able to convert if you needed to. But I would stick to metro markets if that's something that's on your checklist, a box that needs to be checked.
Yeah, that's good advice. Saba has a question, Avery. She says, as far as age of the property, would you say no to property based on age?
No, I don't own now, I flipped it, but I have bought a property built in the 1850s. I currently have a 12 unit apartment building built in 1901. So as long as it's been maintained well, if it's fallen down, no. But if it's in good shape, just because it's old, as long as I understand, the different maintenance that it's going to need, if it's a good deal, I don't discriminate based on that. Because you can get some, and they're like, especially in like New England markets, there are going to be some old properties that are going to be really pretty that would do really well. So as long as it's been taken care of properly, I don't discriminate based on age.
Awesome. Lorena has a question, and you kind of may have touched upon it, but I think we just may get a little more granular there. When you're looking for data besides AirDNA and awning, what else do you use? Because sometimes there are discrepancies and there is an overestimation of revenue.
So on both of those, when you're typing in that address for it to spit out a number, it'll show you the properties that it used to get to that number. So just make sure you look at all of those and see, oh, well, this one looks like it is much better than the property that I'm buying. So this might be a little bit of an overestimation, or, maybe there's some in there that's like, your grandma who rents out her beach house when she's not there and the pictures are terrible and you can see her in the mirror taking it with her flip phone. You're probably going to do better than that. So just make sure you're doing a full, thorough look at everything that it used to get there, and enemy method as well. But again, same answer as before, get as many data points as possible.
And for the enemy method, they go on Airbnb and what else would you recommend? Just
I would say, so Airbnb and Vrbo, just the OTAs, and look and see what your enemies are doing, especially what their pricing is, and kind of a hack to tell if somebody is managing something well, because you could buy a property from somebody and they're making $30,000 a year and you make $130,000 a year just because they sucked at managing. And a hack that I use when I'm enemy methoding to kind of be able to tell if a self-manager or even a property manager is utilizing technology properly is to look at their calendar and see what their pricing is. And, I would take a sample, the second week of each month for the next 3 or 4 months. If the prices are the same for each of those 3 weeks and 3 different months, then they're not using dynamic pricing. And if they're not using dynamic pricing, you can pretty much bet they're not using the other technology that they would really need to optimize either. So if I see that on a calendar, I pretty much know, okay, this is underperforming because they're not paying attention to, big events where they could get more money and things like that.
Awesome. Afrina says, I bought my property through a short-term shop and I highly recommend them, which we already know that Avery and Luke are both awesome. And I think we have one final question. And then if anyone else on Zoom has, we have 2 now, more questions, just raise your hand. We may have a few minutes to just unmute and have a conversation. But Sidra asks, would you recommend buying a property that's already operating as an STR? The property is in Sedona.
Yeah. So that can be, you guys are all physicians, so probably the income and purchase price is not going to be an issue here. But for somebody who might be strapped for cash and maybe doesn't have the cash to furnish a property from the ground up, buying existing ones where the furniture just comes with it can be a really good hack for not having to go spend $40,000 and a lot of time and effort and headache to furnish something. So I think everything, all but 2 of mine have been existing short-term rentals. So, you might just need to do a little freshen up, but yeah, I would totally buy one that's an existing, and I would buy one that's not. I'd do either one as long as it was in the right area for what I wanted to do.
Perfect. Well, I think that wraps up questions as far as I'm seeing. We are done. If anyone else wants to unmute, you can. Soumya's on here. Hey, Soumya. Thank you for helping put this together.
Hi. Thank you, Avery.
Hey.
Awesome. Okay. I think it's a wrap. Thank you so much, Avery. This was so much fun. And I feel like we're just scratching the surface as far as your expertise goes, but I really do appreciate it. Thank you for all of this.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Happy to do it.
Thank you, guys. Okay. We're going to hop off here.
Thank you.
Oh, so I think we did very good with time, Avery.
Cool. Yeah, we did.
Yes. Awesome. Okay. Yeah, thank you. And I